Politics is an art and not science. What is required for its mastery is not the rationality of the engineer, but the wisdom and the moral strength of the statesman. Whose statement is this? None other than Hans Morgenthau. What is the significance of Morgenthau? Morgenthau is known as father of realism in international politics. And what is the significance of realism that adds weight to the stature of Morgenthau? The significance of realism is it is known as the hegemonic perspective of international politics. Was Morgenthau the first person to give the realist perspective of international politics? No. There were scholars before him, like E.H. Carr, Reinhold Niebuhr. So, what is the contribution of Morgenthau? The first person to make realism as a systematic school of thought. And what gives it a systematic view? The 6 famous principles of realism, which Morgenthau says that the scientific principles of realism. And the interesting thing is, these principles of realism were given by Morgenthau in the second edition and not the first edition of his magnum opus, that is, Politics Among Nations, the Struggle for Power and Peace. Now, what are the 6 principles of realism which Morgenthau tells as the scientific principles of international politics? The first principle is international politics is governed by the objective laws. And what is the source of these objective laws? Human nature. And how is the human nature? Morgenthau takes the Hobbesian approach and suggests that man is animus dominandi, a power-seeking animal. So, how does that impact the politics? According to Morgenthau, why international politics is a struggle for power? Because the human nature is power-seeking and international politics is extension of human nature. Now, the second principle of Morgenthau, which is the greatest and the defining aspect of Morgenthau's theory, and that is his concept of national interest. So what Morgenthau says, he says that the prime motivation of all foreign policies is national interest. But he says that in international politics, the means to secure the national interest is power. Goes to the extent of suggesting that in international politics, power is both a means as well as end. Now, the third principle is about the nature of national interest. As you may have heard about Lord Palmerston's statement, what does he say? In international politics, there are no permanent friends and permanent enemies. In a similar tone, what Morgenthau says that national interest is a highly dynamic concept, means it keeps on changing. Today, India's national interest may be served by being close to Russia, or tomorrow it can change. Now, the next 2 principles, that is 4th principle and 5th principles. Normally, there is a lack of clarity in these 2 principles and they appear very similar. So why they appear similar? Because in these 2 principles, Morgenthau has discussed the role of morality or ethics in international politics. It is also important that we should not believe the myth that Morgenthau does not recognize the role of ethics. He does recognize the role of ethics. Ethics does play the role in international politics. But what Morgenthau wants to tell in his 4th principle is that ethics cannot be the limitation. Ethics cannot be the constraint. Ethics cannot determine the choices of the states. I will read the words of Morgenthau exactly for your clarity. So what he says that principle number 4 is very important and confusing because people believe that realism doesn't give any regard to the ethics. It is not like that. So the 4th principle is political realism is aware of the moral significance of political action. It is also aware of the tension between the moral command and the requirements of successful political action. So, what does that mean? It means that there is a moral significance of political action, but realism is to accept it that there is a limitation and occasions may come where morality can constrain our options so far the national interest is concerned. And now, a similar principle, but the message is different, and the similar principle is the fifth principle, where Morgenthau is telling that universal moral aspirations cannot be applied in context of the state in their abstract sense. Let me read out. Political realism refuses to identify the moral aspirations of a particular nation with the moral laws that governs the universe. So what exactly he means to say? He means to say there can be moral aspirations. A state can talk about ideology. US can talk about ideology of democracy and human rights. India can talk about ideology of third worldism, or when Russia was USSR, it could talk about ideology of communism. But are they working for ideology, or ideology is a means and national interest is the aim? And hence he says that let us not assume these universal moral principles to be applied in case of states in the abstract sense. And the last but not least, the essence of realism in his sixth principle, that politics is neither ethics nor law nor economy. Just like every field has its unique features, so politics, and politics should be seen as an autonomous activity, something what Machiavelli has said. Among the important works of Morgenthau, besides Politics Among Nations, you can have a look on Scientific Man versus Power Politics, which was published in 1946, In Defense of National Interest, which was published in 1951. And the greatest contribution of Morgenthau is the concept of national interest defined in terms of power. Hope this information was useful. With respect to Morgenthau, who is the tallest figure among the theoreticians of international politics, do let us know how this video has helped us, and if any specific thinker you want me to discuss, do write in the comment box.